The marble was cold through my dress. I remember that detail more clearly than any other from that day, colder than I expected, even through the fabric, even in August. The kind of cold that has nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with the particular quality of humiliation, sudden, public, and designed. I lay there for what felt like a long time. It was probably 4 seconds. My name is Clara Hensley. I am 34 years old. I have a master's degree in landscape architecture, a small practice I built from a single drafting table in a borrowed studio, 3 years of clinical documentation from a neurologist I trust completely, and a progressive pain condition that my family spent most of those 3 years deciding, collectively and individually, was something I had chosen. A performance. A strategy. A habit I had cultivated the way other people cultivate hobbies, with dedication and a certain creative investment. The cane my father had just ripped from my hand was not a prop. It was not a gesture. It was the difference on most days between walking and not walking, between attending my sister's wedding and watching it from a live stream in my apartment. I had made the choice to come. I had made the choice to dress carefully, to arrive early enough to find a seat close to the aisle, to smile during the ceremony even when the standing portion sent pain up my right leg like a current, to eat appetizers and speak to relatives I hadn't seen in a year, and perform the ordinary social labor of being present at a family occasion. I had arranged accessible parking. I had confirmed, twice, that the venue had a step-free entrance. I had packed an extra dose of my medication in my evening bag because I knew, based on 3 years of knowing my own body, that the combination of prolonged sitting, the standing ceremony, and the stress of being around my family for an extended period would cost me more than an average day. I had made every possible choice toward being present. My father made a different one. I should tell you about before because the marble floor doesn't make full sense without it. 3 years ago, I was the person in our family everyone was proudest of. Youngest to finish her degree. First to start a business. The one who remembered every birthday and every anniversary, who organized Christmas dinner and made the seating chart and called to check on people in the weeks after difficult moments when most people had moved on. I was not perfect. I was not especially remarkable. But I was dependable in the way that certain people in families are dependable, quietly, without much acknowledgement, in the way that makes everyone assume the dependability will simply continue forever regardless of what happens to the person providing it. I had spent my adult life being the person who showed up. It had not occurred to me or to anyone else to ask what it cost. The symptoms started in the spring I turned 31. A burning sensation in my right foot that I initially attributed to new shoes. I threw the shoes away and bought different ones. The burning continued. Then it moved up my calf, into my knee, a spreading heat that was wrong in the way that only your own body can be wrong, that combination of familiarity and wrongness that is impossible to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. Then came the sensitivity. Temperature became a negotiation. The shower had to be calibrated to within a narrow band, too hot, and the burning intensified into something I had no adequate word for. Too cold, and my leg would seize in a cramp that left me sitting on the tile floor waiting for it to pass, sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes for 20. My general practitioner ordered blood work, then more blood work, then a referral, then another referral. For 8 months, I described the same symptoms to 6 different faces in 6 different examination rooms, and I watched each face cycle through the same progression. Initial attention, careful note-taking, the slight softening that comes when tests come back normal, and then the expression I came to dread, the one I could identify before it fully formed, the gentle pivot toward alternative explanations. Stress, anxiety, somatization. The body expressing what the mind hasn't found language for. Very common in women your age. In between those appointments, I described the symptoms to my family. They had a rotating set of explanations ready. Not enough exercise. Too much sitting. Vitamin D deficiency. Hormonal changes. Working too hard. Not sleeping enough. Needing to push through. The way previous generations had pushed through without making their health the organizing principle of their lives. My mother's preferred phrase was, mind over matter. She said it gently, the first several times, in the tone of someone offering genuine wisdom. She believed it. I want to be clear about that. She was not deliberately cruel. She was operating from a framework that had served her throughout her life, and she extended it to me with what she understood as love. The fact that her framework did not match my reality was not something she was equipped, at that point, to consider. Later she said it differently. The gentleness dried out. The phrase arrived with a flatness that carried something else inside it, frustration first, then something that had curdled into a settled conclusion. The conclusion that I had become difficult in a way she hadn't anticipated, and that the appropriate response to difficult people is a firm refusal to participate in their difficulty. My father's approach was more direct. He believed and stated plainly that I had developed a habit of illness, that I had found a mechanism for avoiding things that were hard, and that the mechanism had become self-reinforcing. He cited my sister Becca, who had worked through a broken wrist during tax season without complaint. He cited his own mother, who had managed a family of 7 while dealing with arthritis she'd never complained about. He cited, repeatedly, the principle that previous generations had not had the luxury of stopping, and that the contemporary tendency to pathologize ordinary difficulty was making people less capable, not more resilient. I did not stop. I kept taking clients. I kept designing. I drove myself to early appointments so I could be at my desk by 9. I took site visits on days when I should have been horizontal, walking properties I needed to assess, and then sitting in my car afterward while my leg registered its objection. I kept coming to Sunday dinners and holidays and the slow accumulation of family occasions, each of which had become, by the second year, a quiet negotiation. How much pain could I manage in exchange for the normalcy of being present, and was the exchange still worth making? The answer kept being yes. I do not know now whether that was strength or something else entirely. The diagnosis, when it finally came, was delivered by Dr. Marcus Webb, a neurologist at University Hospital, who saw the pattern in my nerve conduction study before I had finished describing my history. He explained CRPS to me for 40 minutes. He drew a diagram of the nervous system on the exam table paper, marked the points where the signaling had gone wrong, circled the areas where pain was being amplified and misdirected. He used the phrase, one of the most painful conditions in the medical literature, in a tone that was careful and entirely without drama. He told me there was no cure. He said it clearly, without softening it, his particular respect for a patient manifested as directness. He said there were management strategies, and that with the right protocol many patients maintained what he called functional lives. He said functional with honesty about what the word contained, not pain-free, not the life you had before, but capable, with adjustments, of continuing to do the things that mattered. I sat in his office and cried for the first time in 18 months. Not because the diagnosis was devastating, though it was, but because it was real. Because someone with credentials and a diagram and a careful voice had looked at my test results and confirmed, without hedging, without pivoting. This is real. This is documented. This has a name. This is not a choice. I was not performing. I was not avoiding. I was not failing to apply sufficient mental discipline to my own nervous system. I was sick. It was documented. And the documentation existed now, on paper in a clinic under my name. I told my family that evening. I sent a long message to our group chat, careful, factual, with a link to the NIH page on CRPS, and a note that I was relieved to finally have an answer. My mother replied after 40 minutes. We'll look into it. My father replied after 2 hours. I hope this gives you the answers you were looking for. My sister Becca sent a heart emoji and, love you. Let's talk soon. We did not talk soon. The wedding planning had its own gravity, and I had entered the specific category of family member that chronic illness creates, present but logistically complicated, emotionally requiring without clear emotional need, loved in theory and maneuvered around in practice. In the months between the diagnosis and the wedding, the cane became the family's primary text. I had started using it 6 months after the diagnosis, when Dr. Webb and I agreed that the energy I was spending on managing my gait, the constant microcompensations, the unconscious bracing, the way I was redistributing weight to protect my right leg in ways that were now creating secondary problems in my hip and lower back, was costing me more than the cane would. It was a practical decision, arrived at with clinical evidence and recorded in my treatment notes. To my family, it was something different entirely. My mother's first response, when she saw it, was a long silence followed by, "Is that really necessary?" My father's first response, 2 weeks later at Sunday dinner, was to suggest that the cane might be making things worse, that by leaning on it I was preventing my leg from learning to manage, without it, the way a cast weakens the muscles it protects. He said it with the confidence of someone who had done sufficient research to feel authorized. I explained that CRPS was not an injury healing under a cast, that the mechanism was entirely different, that Dr. Webb had been explicit. He nodded in the way of someone who has heard what you said and filed it under her perspective. Over the following months, I watched the cane acquire, in the family's emotional vocabulary, a specific charge. It became a visible argument. My father couldn't look at it without looking briefly away, the way you look away from something that accuses you. My mother sometimes didn't look at it at all. At family gatherings, there was a new pattern. Conversation recalibrated when the cane entered it, a slight withdrawal, as if it had reminded people of a disagreement they'd prefer to table. I learned, over time, that presence without safety is not the same thing as connection. My practice, in those years, was what kept me intact. I had started Hensley Landscape Design 4 years before the diagnosis with a single client, a couple who wanted their backyard redesigned around a Japanese maple they'd planted the year they got married and refused to lose, and had grown it, through work and referrals and the slow accumulation of a reputation for careful, site-specific design, into a roster of 11 ongoing clients and a small team. I was not wealthy. I was comfortable in the modest way of someone who has built something real entirely from their own effort and vision. My assistant Priya had arrived as a final semester intern and had never quite left. She was 26, sharp, and possessed of the particular quality that makes certain people irreplaceable. She understood what needed doing before being asked, and she did it without requiring acknowledgement. She had, without discussion, reorganized the office, so my workstation was closer to the accessible restroom. She had developed a scheduling system that clustered my site visits on days following my better nights, based on patterns she had tracked by watching me over 6 months, a system she had constructed entirely on her own and never once mentioned to me, and that I had noticed with a gratitude I expressed inadequately and felt deeply. On the days I arrived late because getting dressed had taken longer than expected, she covered without comment and without the particular quality of pointed patience that is worse than complaint. She was at the wedding because I had listed her as my +1, partly practical, partly because she was one of the 2 or 3 people in my life I genuinely trusted to witness things accurately. Dr. Marcus Webb was at the wedding through a professional connection to Becca's new husband's family. When I had mentioned, at an appointment 2 weeks before, that I was anxious about the day, the duration, the physical demands, the sustained social performance in an environment that had become increasingly difficult, he had asked with the directness I had come to rely on whether I would like him to sit somewhere nearby. He was going regardless. He could simply position himself to be available. I said yes. I didn't fully explain why, even to myself, but I had attended enough family events in the previous 3 years to understand that something had been building and accelerating. My father's jaw had acquired a new set when he looked at the cane. His patience had developed an edge of something that had moved past impatience into decision. I had the specific feeling of someone who has been reading a room for 3 years and has gotten good at it, that he had arrived at a threshold I couldn't see the far side of. I was right. I just didn't know which occasion would be the one. The ceremony was held in the main hall of a restored Victorian building. High arched ceilings, light through tall windows, wooden chairs with a marble aisle between them. The floors were marble throughout, the ceremony hall, the cocktail area, the main reception space. I had walked them during the rehearsal dinner and noted the friction points, identified where I would need to be most deliberate. I was not anxious exactly. I was prepared in the way that people who manage a physical condition learn to be prepared, not by hoping for the best but by knowing the terrain in advance. The ceremony was beautiful. Becca was radiant in the specific way people are radiant when they have spent a year planning exactly this moment, and it arrives exactly as imagined. Her husband Marcus, a structural engineer from Portland with a good laugh and a quality of attention that made you feel actually seen, watched her walk down the aisle with the expression of someone who cannot believe their luck and is not trying to hide it. I cried during the vows. Priya passed me a tissue, without being asked. The cocktail hour was in the adjacent space. I found my assigned table near the back left, close to an exit, which I had requested because having an exit available reduces the energy I spend calculating whether I'll need one. I ate small plates of food. I spoke to my cousin Diane about her son, who had started walking, and my Uncle Pete about his retirement, which had not gone as planned. I watched Becca move through the room like a person in a film about their own happiest day. My father found me during the second pass of cocktails. He sat down across from me with the particular ease of someone who had had enough to drink to feel that the normal restraints on directness don't fully apply. He was not drunk. My father was a controlled drinker who rarely lost his composure. But there was a looseness to him, a quality of permission that I recognized and that I knew meant he had decided something. "You could have left that at the coat check," he said, with a nod toward my cane. "I need it," I said. "You've been sitting since you arrived." He kept his voice reasonable, the voice of a man constructing a fair argument. "I've been watching. You've barely moved." "I moved to get here from the ceremony hall," I said. "I moved twice to the food table. I went to the restroom once." "You know what I mean." I looked at him. "I know what you mean," I said. "I disagree with it." He shifted. He leaned forward slightly, the way he did when he was preparing to be direct about something he'd been holding. "Your mother thinks this has been hard for you because of where Becca is in her life. That the condition getting worse lately has to do with where she is." He said it carefully, placing something fragile on the table between us. "That maybe all of this is about that." "It isn't," I said. "I'm not saying you're doing it deliberately, Dad." I kept my voice level. "I have a neurological condition with 3 years of clinical documentation. It doesn't correlate with Becca's relationship milestones." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I think you've built a life around this in a way that hasn't been good for you. I think every time you pick that up, you're choosing to be someone who needs it. And I think if you made a different choice today, right now, you'd find out you're capable of more than you've decided you are." I thought about the nerve conduction study. I thought about the diagram on the exam table paper. I thought about 18 months of being told nothing was wrong, and 36 months of being told it was a choice, and the specific and accumulated cost of both. "I'm going to get some water," I said. I stood. Carefully. With the cane. He stood too. And what happened next was 8 seconds in duration, though I have replayed it enough times that it now occupies much more than 8 seconds of my interior life. He reached forward and took the cane. Not grabbed, took, with the deliberate motion of someone acting on a decision that predated this moment by weeks, possibly months. He lifted it and held it at his side and looked at me with an expression I will not forget, relief. The clean, arrived at relief of someone who has finally done the thing they had been building toward. "Walk to your seat," he said. "Just walk. You can do it. Show everyone you can do it." And then, because apparently the private instruction was insufficient, he turned to address the tables nearest to us, 6 of them, 30 people, people who had known me my entire life, and announced in a voice that was clear and carrying and entirely certain of itself, that his daughter had been performing a medical condition for the past 3 years for sympathy and attention, that she was perfectly capable of walking without assistance, and that she was going to do so right now, here in front of all of them, and they were all going to see the truth. Everyone turned. My right leg, which had been managed and compensated and carefully rationed all day, gave out from under me without warning. I hit the marble floor. I want to tell you what it is like to be on the floor of your sister's wedding reception in front of 73 people, because I think precision matters here more than anywhere else in this story. It is very quiet. Even when it isn't quiet, and it wasn't quiet, there were gasps, my father was still speaking, the ambient sound of a reception continued in the far rooms. There is a specific interior silence that arrives when the thing you have most feared has happened. When the private humiliation you have been managing and bracing against for 3 years has been performed, publicly, by someone who loves you. When your body has failed you in the exact way you most dreaded, in the exact place you most dreaded, in front of the exact witnesses whose presence made you most afraid. I did not cry. Not because I was strong in any meaningful sense, but because the particular quality of that moment was beyond the reflex of tears. It was beyond most responses. I lay on the cold marble and looked at the ceiling, which was, I noticed, distantly beautiful, the original plasterwork intact, the kind of craftsmanship nobody funds anymore, and I thought something very simple.
Well,
There it is. Priya was already moving from her table. I could hear her shoes on the marble. Dr. Webb was already standing from his. He is not a large man, Dr. Marcus Webb. He is 61 years old, trim, with silver-framed reading glasses he keeps in his breast pocket. His manner of speaking is always precise and never raised. In 3 years of treating me, he has delivered difficult information with a consistency of calm that I understand now is not detachment but discipline. The hard-earned, long-practiced steadiness of someone who has chosen, thousands of times across a career that began before I was born, to be the least reactive person in the room. Because in rooms where someone needs to be least reactive, that choice is the one that saves things. He straightened his jacket. He walked, unhurried, to where my father was standing. He did not look at the guests. He did not look at Becca, who had seen something from across the room and was already moving. He looked at my father with the direct, undivided attention of a clinician and said, in a voice that carried exactly, as far as it needed to, "Your daughter has complex regional pain syndrome. It is a documented neurological condition. What you just did, removing her mobility aid and causing her to fall, constitutes assault on a disabled person under the state statutes. I am her physician. I have 3 years of clinical records, and I have personally witnessed this incident."
he paused.
Not for effect, to allow what he had said to arrive. "I will be filing an incident report with the hospital's patient advocacy office tonight.
I have already noted the time.
The venue has security cameras, and I will be requesting that the footage be preserved. I would strongly recommend that you consult an attorney before speaking further." The 7 words that made the room go silent, "Your daughter has complex regional pain syndrome," were not dramatic. They were clinical, irrefutable, delivered by the one person in that room whose authority my father had not anticipated and could not dismiss with the tools he had spent 3 years developing: personal interpretation, family consensus, accumulated repetition. Dr. Webb had none of that in his hands. He had records, a medical license, and the specific standing of a physician who had just witnessed his patient assaulted by her own father. My father stood holding my cane.
His face had changed.
It was the face of a man who has, for 3 years, operated inside a version of events that has just been revised without his consent, publicly, in front of every witness available, with no mechanism for recourse. Dr. Webb walked to where I was lying. He crouched down, not all the way to the floor, just enough to be at my level, and placed the cane on the marble beside me, within reach but not in my hand. Because he knew, from 3 years of appointments and careful attention, that I preferred to manage my own standing. That being helped up was different from being given the means to get up myself. "Can you stand?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Give me a moment." "Take your time," he said. He remained crouched beside me, not assisting, just present. Witness. Priya was on my other side, her hand on my shoulder. Not pulling, not lifting, not doing anything that wasn't simply being there. I took my time. I found my footing. I stood. I smoothed my dress. The room had not resumed. 73 people were still watching. I walked, with my cane, back to my table. I sat down. I lifted my water glass and drank from it. My hands were steady. I was surprised by that. Actually, I had expected them not to be. There are things I won't tell you about the next hour because they belong to Becca and to Becca's marriage and to the day she had built toward for the better part of a year. What I will tell you is that she found me near the coat check, and that she took both my hands in hers, and that she looked at me for a long moment before she spoke. "I knew it was wrong," she said. "I want you to know that. I've always known it was wrong. I didn't say so because it was easier not to, and I'm ashamed of that." She wasn't talking about that night only. She was talking about the group chat, the years of silence, the 1,000 small failures to push back, on the conversations she'd witnessed, on the dynamics she'd been present for and said nothing about, on the way the family had built a shared account of me that she had never formally objected to, even when she didn't believe it. I know, I said. I'm sorry. She was crying. I should have said something a long time ago. I looked at my sister in her wedding dress. I thought about what it costs to be the person in a family who accommodates, who adjusts and makes herself smaller and quieter so that the people who love her not confronted with anything inconvenient about how they have been treating her. I thought about that cost, measured not in incidents, but in years. In the ordinary, daily, invisible arithmetic of years. Have a good marriage, I said. That's what I want for tonight. She held my hands tighter.
She cried.
I did not. Priya drove me home. She didn't say much during the drive, which was correct. She put on music and kept it low and drove carefully on the route that was easier on my leg. When she dropped me off, she said, "You were remarkable tonight." I said, "I was just there." She shook her head. "That's what I mean," she said. Dr. Webb texted at 7 the next morning. Incident report filed with Hospital Patient Advocacy and our state's Disability Rights Commission. Venue has confirmed footage preservation. DA's office has been notified. You don't need to do anything immediately.
Rest.
Call me Monday if you want to talk through next steps. I sat in my kitchen and read that message 3 times. Then I made coffee. Then I opened my laptop and returned to the project I had been putting off, a rooftop garden for a community center on the north side of the city. Native plants. Minimal maintenance. Designed around the specific wind patterns of that building at that particular intersection, which I had studied for 2 weeks and which were stranger and more interesting than I had initially expected. I worked for 4 hours. My pain level that morning was what I would have rated a 6, which was a day I considered functional. I was good at my work. I had always been good at my work. My father, in 34 years, had never once asked me about it. The legal proceedings took 8 months. My father was charged with misdemeanor assault under the state's disability protection statutes. The venue's security footage was clear and unambiguous. Dr. Webb's incident report was detailed and clinically precise. My father's attorney advised him to complete the process without contesting the charges. He completed a 16-hour mandated educational program on disability law and disability rights. He paid a fine. He did not go to prison. He did not lose his job. He did not, as far as I know, ever fully accept the framing that what he had done was assault. He accepted the legal classification the way you accept a parking ticket, as an administrative consequence rather than an accurate account of his own character. What he lost was harder to classify. My mother told me, 9 months after the wedding, that he had become quieter at home, that he had stopped making the comments he used to make, that he had arrived, she thought, at some internal reckoning she couldn't fully read. She said this not as reassurance, but as honest report. She had started, by then, to distinguish between the two, which was its own kind of progress. My mother called me 3 months after the wedding, on a Sunday afternoon. She said she wanted to talk. I let her. She explained, in the careful way of someone who has been composing this for weeks, that she had not understood, that she had genuinely believed I was capable of more than I claimed, and that mind over matter had been true for her in ways that mattered, and she had extended it without thinking about whether it was the right tool for a different person with a different body and a different condition. That she had not meant to cause harm, and had caused it anyway, which she was learning was something that happened even when you believed yourself to be acting from love. She did not use the phrase mind over matter during the call. I noticed its absence. I gave her credit for it. She said, "I don't know how to fix this." I said, "I don't think there's a fix exactly. There are just choices you make going forward. And I think trying matters." I do. We hung up. I sat with the conversation, not resolving it, not packaging it, just sitting with the full weight of it. Then I called Priya to confirm the Thursday site visit. The rooftop garden opened 8 months after the wedding. It was the best work I had produced in 4 years. Maybe the best I had produced. The raised planters, the wind-filtering native grasses, the bench seating angled south to catch the winter light that the building's position made available for roughly 2 hours each afternoon. I had designed it around what was actually there, the real wind, the real light, the real constraints, rather than around what would have been easier or more conventional. I had designed it the way I had learned, slowly and at cost, to design everything in my life, around the actual terrain, rather than the terrain I might have wished for. Standing on the roof the morning of the opening, I thought about the marble floor. I thought about the 4 seconds I had lain there and the things that had grown in the time since. I thought about my sister's hands holding mine near the coat check. I thought about Dr. Webb crouching beside me with a cane placed within reach, waiting without rushing, present without pulling. Dr. Webb came to the opening. He walked the garden slowly, in the way of someone who is genuinely looking. He asked good questions about the native grasses, about the drainage calculations, about whether the benches were bolted or freestanding. At the end, he stood at the south bench and looked out at the city moving through an ordinary Tuesday morning. Pain levels, he asked. Consistent, I said. Managed. Good, he said. We stood there in the morning light, not talking, in the comfortable silence that exists between people who have been through something together and no longer need to narrate it. Below us, the city went about its business. I leaned on my cane and felt the sun on the side of my face and thought about what it means to be witnessed. Not saved, I want to be precise about this. I had not needed saving in the way the word implies. What I had needed at the precise moment I needed it was someone with the standing to name what they saw accurately. To say the clinical name. To say, I have witnessed this. That was all. It was not nothing. Some doors, when they close, are not losses. Some falls are the moment before you finally fully stand. I know that now in a way I could not have known before I hit that floor, which is perhaps the only honest thing I can say my father gave me. That night, and all the ordinary mornings that followed it.